Trackhouse Racing has announced their second driver for the 2022 season. NASCAR is looking more closer to be moving the number places on the cars, and Ware Racing is interested in only having two competitive cars for the 2022 season. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to another video. We got a lot of NASCAR stories discussed here today on the channel. Let's go and just jump straight into those very quickly. We're going to start off with Josh Berry, as Josh Berry won the Cars Tour Late Model Throwback 276 at Hickory Speedway earlier this weekend. He had a really good battle with Mason Diaz. It was very clean, but very solid racing for the victory. With a few laps to go in the race, we saw some really awesome battles going throughout the event, but at the end of the racing, clean racing, Mason Diaz was not able to pass him, and Josh Berry was able to win. I believe Josh Berry also won the other race that he had participated in, so it was really good overall to see Josh Berry score the victory in that event, and it's not very surprising considering he drives for Junior Motorsports, and he has really good equipment, but Josh Berry is a very good late model racer, and I think he did a really good job in that event. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Kyle Larson. Kyle Larson also this past weekend won some races. He won the Prairie Dirt Classic at Ferrybury for the World of Outlaws Late Model Tour, and he had a whole lot of hard-charging Bobby Pierce, who was starting to catch him late in the event, but Kyle Larson put up a really dominating race overall, and he was able to win that event. It doesn't matter what series Kyle Larson gets involved in. Kyle Larson seems to be really fast in whatever cars he's been able to drive, so it was really good overall to see Kyle Larson win this weekend as well. And I'm overall not surprised considering Kyle Larson is really good at dirt racing, so it did not surprise me one bit that Kyle Larson won this weekend in that event as well. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about a title sponsor for this weekend for the NASCAR Xfinity Series race at Watkins Glen. This weekend, they are going to be sponsored by Screwball Peanut Butter Whiskey 200. I never had peanut butter whiskey, but it's really cool to be having another company that is getting involved in sponsoring. I'm not sure. I've never heard of this company before. I think it's the first time I've ever heard of this company. I don't know what they do. I don't believe that they're a whiskey company, if I'm not mistaken. But to me, I think it's really cool that you have another sponsor that is getting involved and sponsoring NASCAR. It's definitely a really good story overall for sure. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we are talking about the Kyle Larson Fan Suite. This weekend at the Bass Pro Shops NRA Night Race weekend at Bristol, there's going to be a new suite that is going to be made for Kyle Larson fans. It's going to be coming to Bristol for the Bass Pro Shops NRA Night Race. They already have a couple suites out at Bristol Motor Speedway. They have one, I think, for Tilley, and I also believe they have one for Kyle Busch as well. They've been doing this as basically like interesting. They've been doing this for the last couple of years, bringing fans together of a certain driver. You can spend a lot of money to get in there and talk about certain drivers. If you could sit with fans of that certain driver as well, you may be able to become friends with them. I'm not exactly sure, but I think it's really cool that there is a new fan suite that is coming overall for Kyle Larson fans. I think that this is a really good story overall for sure, and definitely something I'm really excited about overall for sure. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we are talking about color window nets. It was announced by Bob Pockrass and NASCAR that NASCAR's updated a rule on colors for window net rules was driver window nets must be black. Now it is driver windows nets must be black unless otherwise authorized by NASCAR. And I do think that this leads into another story that we talked about. Remember when Ryan Pisano tweeted out that the playoff colors looked like they were coming back, the yellow playoff numbers? Well, with this announcement, it looks like that if teams want to change up their colors, especially for the playoffs, they can go and do that. I think that this is really cool. Now, I think some drivers might get distracted. I think one reason why they went originally back to this rule was because of that. But I think that this overall is a really cool change overall that is coming for NASCAR. I think especially since we got the playoffs coming around, these teams can change up the colors on their cars. And I think that this is going to look really cool. Overall, my honest opinion, I'm really looking forward to see what these playoff cars look like because they look really yellow, and it's a throwback as well. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we are talking about the SRX. It was reported by Adam Stern that CBS Sports Chairman Sean McManus says, "We produce auto racing as well as anyone else this year, but he's also hoping for ratings growth for higher growth for SRX in year number 2. The SRX this year in 2021 had really good ratings considering there wasn't as much promotion as other series here. It generally had about 1.3 to 1.4 million viewers in all their events averaging throughout the year, which for a series that literally just started up this year, I think overall is very solid. I do think that if you bring some personalities like I don't know, Dale Earnhardt Jr. into the series, maybe Chase Tilley back a couple times. Maybe you bring Jimmy Johnson overall if he's interested in running this event. Maybe bring like Matt Kenseth back into this event. Drivers that bring a lot of fans, and Jeff Gordon's another one I'm thinking about too. But if you bring people into this series that have a lot of fandom and a lot of people that are interested, I think that you'll bring a lot more intrigue in it. But the fact that they were able to have as much ratings is that there wasn't as much, people promoting this, except us, like people like you and me on YouTube and stuff, and people on social media. The fact that this series was able to do as good as it did, I think is really, really awesome to see overall that the series did as well. And I do think that next year, depending on what their driver lineup is, I do think that next year that I think we'll see more people tune into it. I think people really want it more, and the more people are talking about it, the more likely you're going to get to see more people come and watch it. So I think it's really cool overall that the SRX got as much attention as it did, though. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we are talking about the Indianapolis NASCAR weekend. According to Adam Stern, Doug Bull says he's expecting a crowd around 50,000 to 60,000 for the NASCAR Cup Series Verizon 200 road course race at Indy next month. Honestly, that's not too bad. I mean, that's not honestly that great considering Indianapolis Motor Speedway can hold about 250,000 to 300,000 viewers. But that is a little bit more than the last couple of NASCAR races that have happened at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Usually the track has only had about 30 to 40,000 fans that generally do come out to the event. 50 to 60,000 fans is an increase, so that's not bad so far. That's what they're expecting overall. I don't know if they're going to have any restrictions for Indianapolis Motor Speedway or not. That might be one of the reasons why there's only 50 to 60,000. I don't think they've announced that everyone is allowed to come into that event at the time, so I think that's why there's probably only 50 to 60,000 fans that are allowed in the event at this time right now. So I think that's one of the biggest reasons right there. But, I mean, it is what it is overall. There's only 50 to 60,000. I wish there were more coming to that event. But I do think that they're not selling in certain areas of the track, like certain grandstands. I don't think they're selling in areas. So I do think that's why that there's only 50 to 60,000 fans that are at the event overall. And very interesting for sure on that front. And now we're going to jump on to the next stories of today's episode. We're going to have two stories combined into one. We're going to talk about the ARCA race that happened this past weekend, I believe at Winchester Speedway. There were two major incidents that happened this weekend in those events, and honestly, I'm really, really kind of frustrated about the ARCA series. First incident we're going to talk about is Taylor Gray versus Daniel Dye. So, I think it was on lap 84 or 85 of the event. Daniel Dye and Taylor Gray got into a really, really good battle. Daniel Dye passed him clean. And Taylor Gray basically turns him into the right rear corner panel and turns him up onto the racetrack and gets into the outside wall. Pretty much, this is one of the dirtiest moves I have seen in racing this year. Very, very dirty. You do not turn somebody into the right rear corner panel and turn him into the outside wall. That is disgusting. That is dirty, and that should never happen in any type of motorsport. I don't care. That is terrible, terrible, and no good dirty driving, and that should not happen. And Taylor Gray is supposed to basically be racing this upcoming weekend at Watkins Glen in the Truck Series. Not only that, Taylor Gray gave Daniel Dye a minor concussion. So that's really, really sucks. Now, luckily, Daniel Dye is going to be allowed to race for Ben Kennedy Racing coming up later this week. But he basically hurt Daniel Dye really, really bad. And the dads were not happy with that incident either. I can't imagine the dads being really, really happy with that. I think that was a really, really dumb and really, really stupid move on Taylor Gray's part. He never should dump somebody on the corner. The other incident we're going to talk about is Ty Gibbs versus Corey Heim. With around 4 or 5 laps to go in the event, they were cashing lap cars, were battling for the win, and Corey Heim was about to pass Stab Moffitt. He had to check up a little bit, and Ty Gibbs got into the back of him. There was contact, and basically what ended up happening is that Ty Gibbs spun Corey Heim. In my honest opinion on that, it is still Ty Gibbs' fault. That's not as deliberate. These two have had issues in the past throughout the year. Look back to a couple weeks ago when Corey Heim gave basically the bump and run to Ty Gibbs. To me, I think that this move is not as dirty. I think it's still a little bit aggressive. Probably should have held back a little bit. But I'm not as frustrated about that as a Taylor Gray incident. But if you look at these ARCA races, they're becoming more and more like bloodbaths. And it's really hard to judge where talent is coming from or not at the moment. But in my opinion, if you look back at the incident, I have to say that Ty Gibbs was still at fault for the incident. And he really never took apology in that front, in my honest opinion. They should have probably taken an apology for that. Because in my opinion, that was his fault. And that was really, really stupid on his part, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Michael Munley. As Michael Munley is going to be driving the number 6 for JD Motorsports this weekend at Watkins Glen. I believe Michael Munley has a lot of road course experience, and we've had definitely some road course drivers that have come in this year and driven them. You look at drivers like Spencer Pumpelly, who's driven them very, very well. He does have a lot of experience at this track, I believe, so I don't really know much other than that. But I think it's really cool they're bringing someone in. I'm definitely looking forward to see how well he does. I hope he does really, really well because, in my honest opinion, I like to see a new face come into sport and do very, very well. And I'm looking forward to his NASCAR Xfinity Series debut because this will be his debut, and he's the champion last year in some sort of V8 series, if I'm not mistaken. So really, really cool that Michael Munley is going to be making his NASCAR Xfinity Series debut. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we are talking about Dave Smith. As Dave Smith will be driving the number 52 for Jimmy Means Racing this weekend at Watkins Glen. I believe Dave Smith is the guy who runs the Performance Racing School, if I'm not mistaken. He's also raced in a lot, at least, I think, 10 or 11 road course races, whether it's in the when it was K&N or ARCA. He has raced in those events. So he does have a lot of experience on road course races, including this track as well, by the way. So I'm definitely wishing Dave Smith the best luck in his NASCAR Xfinity Series debut. Hope he runs really, really well. I think that road course experience could help them. I would expect Greg Gall to be back in a couple weeks in that car, but very interested in bringing Dave Smith in to make his NASCAR Xfinity Series debut, and I'm wishing him the best of luck overall for sure. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we are talking about Kyle Tilley. As Kyle Tilley will be driving the number 99 for McLeod Motorsports this weekend at Watkins Glen in the NASCAR Xfinity Series. Kyle Tilley will be racing as well in the NASCAR Cup Series race in the number 78 for Live Fast Motorsports, and he will also be making his NASCAR Xfinity Series debut for that team overall as well. To me, Kyle Tilley has done really, really well in those expected road course races, and he's done very, very solid. Well, he hasn't done absolutely great, to be honest with you, but I think that road course experience will come into play very, very well. I'm definitely wishing him overall the best of luck in his NASCAR Xfinity Series debut. I think this will also be his first NASCAR Xfinity Series race as well, by the way. So I definitely overall wishing him the best of luck for sure, and I hope he runs really, really well at Watkins Glen in the NASCAR Xfinity Series. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we are talking about Andy Lally. As Andy Lally will be driving the number 78 for McLeod Motorsports in the NASCAR Xfinity Series at the Indianapolis Road Course. I expect Andy Lally to do very, very well. He's done very, very well in these cars throughout the year. He ran top 20 a lot of the event in Mid-Ohio for McLeod Motorsports, and I think that he'll have a lot of really, really good speed in this event as well. I would not be shocked, considering how much experience he overall does have for McLeod Motorsports. I would not overall be really, really shocked if Andy Lally ends up potentially getting a top 10 or even a top 15 this weekend. I think that'd be really good for the Motorsports situation for that number 78 team, and I hope he does really, really well because I like Andy Lally a lot, and I hope this also is not the last time we're going to see Andy Lally race. But yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing Andy Lally make his NASCAR return this weekend at the Indianapolis Road Course. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we are talking about Will Rogers. As Will Rogers will be driving the 41 for Cram Enterprises this weekend here at Watkins Glen, making his NASCAR Truck Series debut. Will Rogers has won a couple races in the K&N East Series here at Watkins Glen, so he does have a lot of road course experience overall at this track. And to me, I think he'll do very, very well. I think he'll show a lot of speed this weekend. I mean, the Cram Enterprises trucks have ran top 25, and they've definitely been picking up a lot more speed as time is going on. I think a top 10 or top 15 would be really, really exception goal. So I think if he can get a top 20 this weekend with how much road course experience he has, I think that would be really, really good overall for this team. I'm definitely wishing a lot of the best of luck to Will Rogers. I like Will Rogers a lot. He ran really, really well for Sam Hunt Racing in the NASCAR Xfinity Series. I think he's a very, very talented driver, and I think that he will do very, very well this weekend, and I definitely wish him the best of luck this weekend here at Watkins Glen. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we are talking about Corey Heim. Corey Heim will once again be driving the number 51 for Kyle Busch Motorsports this weekend at Watkins Glen. Corey Heim has already made a start this year in the number 51 at Darlington. He was running very, very well in the Truck Series race at Darlington, ran top 5 in majority event, was actually contending for the win, as a matter of fact, in that number 51 car. But unfortunately, late in this race, he got involved in that big one when he had a couple guys basically check up at the end of the race, and unfortunately, a big one happened at Darlington because people got too impatient and got too crazy. Corey Heim, I believe, is also currently leading the NASCAR, is leading the ARCA Championship at this one. He's won quite a few races in ARCA so far this year. He's won 3 or 4 races in the ARCA Series so far this year. So he's ran really extremely well for Venturini. He's Ty Gibbs' biggest competition there. I think he's a very, very talented driver. He's shown what he's been able to do. He was running really well in the Truck Series race until that crash. I'm definitely wishing the best of luck to Corey Heim, and I hope he runs really, really well this weekend here at Watkins Glen. It was also just revealed that Will Rogers will be driving the number 24 for a second Sam Hunt Racing car. Sam Hunt Racing is going to have 2 cars here this weekend at Watkins Glen, and we're going to see Will Rogers drive the number 24 for them. I believe Santino Ferrucci is in the 26, if I'm not mistaken, or I can't remember exactly who's driving the number 26. But the fact that Will Rogers is getting another opportunity racing Xfinity is really, really cool. Will Rogers ran extremely well. Like I said earlier, he ran extremely well in the NASCAR Xfinity Series return in the number 26 earlier this year at Nashville. So I think that he'll do very, very well, and I'm looking forward to him racing the NASCAR Xfinity Series in the number 24 car as well. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode. It has officially been revealed that Paul Menard will drive the 66 for ThorSport Racing this weekend once again at Watkins Glen. Paul Menard has already raced this year in the NASCAR Truck Series. He raced earlier this year at Circuit Americas and honestly ran pretty well in the number 66 cars. So I'm really excited to see that Mr. Menard, Paul Menard, is officially back in the NASCAR Truck Series, man. Paul Menard, I really think he was a very, very decent and very, very solid driver. And the fact that Paul Menard is coming back to the NASCAR Truck Series, I think is really, really exciting. I would think that the same sponsors that sponsored him the last time he raced are going to sponsor him once again. But the fact that Paul Menard is getting back in the NASCAR Truck Series is really, really exciting, and I'm really looking forward to that for sure. Good to see that Paul Menard is coming back this weekend in the NASCAR Truck Series. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we are talking about Erik Jones. Erik Jones will be making his NASCAR Xfinity Series return this weekend here at Watkins Glen. The last time he raced was in 2019, I believe for Joe Gibbs Racing. He'll drive the number 31 for Jordan Anderson Racing at Watkins Glen. Jordan Anderson Racing has had a lot of very different and intriguing drivers get into their cars this year. Look at drivers they've had. They've had Tyler Reddick drive, Josh Berry drive this year. They had Kaz Grala drive this year. Jordan's also driven this year. Now you have Erik Jones joining the list of drivers that have been racing for this team this year. I think Erik Jones will run extremely well this weekend. He has a lot of experience here at Watkins Glen. He's ran really well for Joe Gibbs Racing. He's had a lot of top fives in the past back in 2019. I believe he got a top 5 in the number 20 car. He ran really, really fast in that event. And I think that he'll be really, really good. He's also been really solid on road courses at points throughout his career. He's very, very underrated on road courses. We don't talk usually about him on road courses, but especially with the experience, I would not be surprised if we see a potential top 5 or top 10 come out for Erik Jones this weekend. I would overall not be shocked, in my opinion, if we do overall see Ty Gibbs get a potential top 5 or top 10. I'm definitely excited to see that Erik Jones is back in the NASCAR Xfinity Series. It's been a couple years. That's one thing I like about Erik Jones. He really hasn't ran a lot of NASCAR Xfinity Series races besides when he's been asked to. So I think it's really cool that he's going back and running for Jordan Anderson Racing. And I think that'll also help Jordan Anderson Racing overall in the points as well. Get them a good position in the owners' points, and I think he will run very, very well this weekend here at Watkins Glen. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we are talking about Darlington. It was reported yesterday by Andy Sheen that Darlington Raceway is expected to have 2 races in the 2022 season. The last time Darlington had 2 races before this year was 2004, and is expecting once again in 2022 that they are going to have 2 races. Honestly, I think Darlington deserves 2 races. The racing at Darlington throughout the last couple of years especially has been really, really solid. We've seen a lot of side-by-side racing, some really, really close racing. Yes, the last time he raced at Darlington, we saw domination by Mark Sheener, but you have to remember that the racing before that had been absolutely excellent. So I think that Darlington is going to overall put on an extremely good show, and I think we'll see a lot out of Darlington. I'm really, really excited about Darlington getting 2 races next year. The races that have been confirmed so far, we know the Daytona 500 will be back on February 20th. We know the championship race for Phoenix will be back, I believe, on the 4th or the 6th. You also are expecting Road America to be back around the 4th of July weekend, and we were expecting Darlington to have 2 races here, but it looks like, according to Kerry Tharp, who basically is the president of Darlington, that we are going to have 2 races next year. I'm definitely excited about this. I really, really like Darlington. Darlington is one of my favorite tracks currently on the NASCAR Cup Series schedule, and in NASCAR in general, to be honest with you. So I'm really looking forward to see that Darlington is coming back next year in 2022 for 2 races, not just 1. I would expect that this would also potentially once again be the throwback weekend as well. So definitely looking forward to that for sure, that we're going to see Darlington back next year, and happy about it because I really like Darlington. It's a great track, and I'm definitely glad that we are going to have that track back twice next year in 2022. And now we're going to jump onto the first of 3 major stories in today's episode, as we are talking about Rick Ware Racing. Rick Ware had an interview recently on Series 7 NASCAR Radio with Jack Arute on the front stretch, and he mentioned that Rick Ware says that his goal is to have 2 competitive cars in the 2022 season. Now, Rick Ware right now currently has 4 cars and has 4 charters at the moment. Now, technically, that 51 car is technically owned by Richard Petty, or Petty Motorsports, but they have a kind of a partnership, but they don't have really affiliation with Petty, except that Petty is on the name of that charter. So they technically own 4 charters currently at the moment. Rick Ware in the past has said that he's been looking to basically downsize a little bit. He says he's going to downsize maybe to 3 cars next year, and now it looks like he's going to be downsizing to 2 cars for the 2022 season. Now, my big question is, if they are going to downsize, who ends up getting the charters? My question is, do they give one of the charters to 2311? 2311 has said that they're looking to expand. Does GMS potentially get a charter next year? GMS wants to go to Cup potentially full-time next year. So do they get one of the charters next year? That is potentially going to happen. I would think that that would be a really, really good decision overall for the team. Now, my other big question right now is that if Rick Ware is potentially going to downsize and have 2 competitive cars, which 2 drivers do I think they choose? The first one I think they choose is James Davison. James Davison has been very, very solid so far in his NASCAR Cup Series races. He's been keeping it. He's been very, very clean on the track. He's been one of the faster drivers that has driven for Rick Ware Racing. He's been really, really fast. At that point, he's been contending for top 30s Rick Ware Racing equipment. So I think that he would definitely be my first choice overall to go there. The other choice I would honestly pick is J.J. Yeley. I know J.J. Yeley had a lot of experience coming in the National, but J.J. Yeley a couple times this year has it running in the top 30 Rick Ware Racing equipment, especially when he's driven the 51 car. I have seen him contend for top 15, top 20s at points. He was running really, really well at Nashville, and I know, like I said, I know that experience kicks in, but when you have a driver that's running really, really good with the Rick Ware Racing equipment, especially when that equipment should not be contending for top 30s and top 20s even at points, you should definitely consider that driver. Now, I definitely think other drivers like Cody Ware, Garrett Smithley, Joey Gase are probably going to be drivers that are up for grabs to potentially put into the rides. But if I had to choose 2 drivers to go in this ride, I definitely would say the 2 drivers I would choose is James Davison and J.J. Yeley. I think both of them be very, very competitive. I also think James Davison is a very worthy of a very, very excellent ride. But that's just my opinion. I think the 2 drivers that should be driving for Rick Ware Racing next year are James Davison and J.J. Yeley. And now we're going to jump on to the next major story of today's episode, as we are talking about number placements on the channel once again. It was reported yesterday by Adam Stern that NASCAR's review with teams of the potential number switch is in the final stage, and barring a late change, it's likely the deal will be moved, specifically Ford, starting next season per sources. And announced it could come within the next coming weeks. I have not been a big fan overall of the number placement, but I have been coming around for one reason, and it is moving the number forward. I have seen a lot of the paint schemes, especially some of the designers like Lefty have designed, and I have to say the number moving forward actually looks really, really cool. And not only that, there have been a few teams that have actually attempted to try this in the past. You look at Furniture Row Racing when Eric Jones drove for them. They actually moved the number forward a little bit. I believe that JT Doherty Racing as well has also done this as well. And I also believe that Kyle Busch a couple years ago, when he was driving with him driving for Joe Gibbs Racing, number 18, they slid the number 18 up as well. So I honestly think that it looks a lot better, and it really isn't as big of a difference. Plus, you actually could put the sponsorship in the middle as well, and teams can do a lot better job, especially with the designers that they have. There's some really good designers that work for some of these teams. You could put you could put a lot more sponsorship growth in there as well. I think moving the number to the back, in my honest opinion, would look terrible. The car would look absolutely horrendous. I know some designers do a really, really good job, but I think that some teams, especially with design portion and stuff, they would get extremely lazy. But if you move the number a little bit forward, I think you have more room to put some of the sponsors there as well, and more sponsor value to go in there as well. Like I said, personally, I'm not overall the biggest fan of moving the numbers. I'd rather just keep the number placement in the middle because that's where originally has worked for a very, very long time. But if we have to move the number placement, I do think that personally moving it forward is going to work out a lot better. And if it is going to increase sponsor value for the team, fair play to them. But I really just think moving the number in general, it's not 100% going to create more sponsor value, especially for guys in 30. What you got to do is, one, you got to give the smaller teams a lot more TV time. You have to give them more of TV time, and they need to be seen on the track, especially for qualifying. Second thing, you got to have more sponsor engagement with the teams. We've started to see over the last year or two, we have started to see more sponsor engagement, and teams have been going out to the track and stuff. We've seen more commercials. I mean, just recently, earlier this year, Daniel Suarez just had a commercial with Freeway Insurance. We've been hearing it on the radio and stuff. We've also been seeing it on TV and stuff. And we've also seen Austin Dillon have commercials with Bass Pro Shops. We've seen Kevin Harvick have commercials. We've seen Ryan Newman get involved with commercials. Clint Boyer had a lot of commercials. And if you look at the Busch, last year I talked about this, Busch had like a 10% increase of their sales with the Busch Apple brand, and they had a 12 or 13% increase overall with Busch Beer last year. So sponsorship value, I think, is very, very important, because I think that this number, I think there are some fans that overall not happy, and I'd rather keep it in the same place. But if we had to make overall a decision in regards to moving the number placement on the cars, I think that this move will work a lot better for teams and designers. It looks a lot better. And we've seen it already in the past be done by teams. Moving the number back, in my opinion, it looked terrible. And it's good that NASCAR, and I think that NASCAR will made the decision too. I think it's because there was a lot of fan outrage over it. So I think that this overall is going to work out a lot better for NASCAR fans in general. And in my personal opinion, I like this move a lot better. Again, I'd rather keep the number in the same place. I think it would work a lot better. But at the same time, if we have to move it, I think moving the number a little bit back forward, I think works a lot better for NASCAR. And I think that teams will do a lot better job, and designers will do a lot better job when it comes to that front, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to jump on to the final major story of today's episode, as we have another silly season bomb that has officially dropped. Ross Chastain is going to be driving for Trackhouse Racing in 2022, driving the number 1 car full time. No sponsorships and crew chiefs have been announced at this time, but that will be announced at a later date. It was either going to be Ross Chastain or Kurt Busch who was going to be driving a second Trackhouse car. Justin Marks wanted to keep one or the other driver in the team. They wanted to probably even try to keep both drivers in the team, but they have decided to go with Ross Chastain on their team. I think overall that this is the right decision to bring Ross Chastain. While Ross Chastain hasn't absolutely had an incredible year in 2022, I think Ross Chastain has been very, very solid this year in 2022. He's been close to fighting for the playoffs this year. I know a lot of people thought that Ross Chastain this year was going to make the playoffs and win races this year in the NASCAR Cup Series, but I think you have to look at some of his lower tier series as well in his aggression. I think Justin Marks really likes that aggression, and Justin Marks said today that he's been a really big fan of Ross Chastain for a very, very long time. And plus, he also raced, I believe, with Ross Chastain as well back in 2018. Was on the same team as Ross Chastain in 2018 as well. And I also think he drove for the same team that Ross drove for back in 2011 as well in the Truck Series, if I'm not mistaken. I believe that he drove the 6.6 truck. Both of them did. So they have raced, I think, for the same team overall as well in the past as well. But I think Ross Chastain is overall the right choice. Ross Chastain's very, very aggressive. I think Ross Chastain is a really, really talented driver. I mean, in 2019, he drove for Nice Motorsports and almost won the championship. He went to the NASCAR Xfinity Series. He didn't win a race at Cog Racing, but he was overall probably the most consistent driver in the NASCAR Xfinity Series last year, almost more consistent than Chase Briscoe last year. So to me, I think Ross Chastain is going to bring a lot to the table for the team. And you have two really, really good drivers, not to mention, that you're going to have on that team as well. I think Daniel Suarez has really proven that he deserves to be in the NASCAR Cup Series. He's done extremely well in the NASCAR Cup Series this year, has ran really, really fast, and has shown a lot of speed this year. I mean, Trackhouse Racing this year has shown what they can be able to do. And I think that with bringing Ross Chastain on, their driver that has that aggression and also could probably bring a little bit of sponsorship value as well. So I would assume that some of the Chip Ganassi Racing sponsors are going to come in as well. I think he's going to see. Plus, they're bringing back the one car as well, by the way. And I think a lot of reason why they're bringing the one car back as well to Trackhouse Racing is because of the fact that Ty Norris, who basically used to work for DEI, brought the one car back since they currently own that at the moment. I think that this overall is going to be an excellent decision for the team overall. I'm really, really happy that they're bringing Ross Chastain. I've been a big fan of Ross Chastain's, so when I heard the news this morning that Ross Chastain was likely going to go to Trackhouse Racing, was really, really good. Now, the big question overall is what happens to Kurt Busch for next year, because Kurt Busch right now is not currently, we don't know what's going to happen to Kurt Busch next year. I personally think Kurt Busch is going to end up at 2311 Racing. I think at this point, with them announcing Ross Chastain going over to Trackhouse Racing full-time next year, I think at this 100% confirms that we are going to see Kurt Busch at 23XI Racing. And I think Kurt Busch is going to gel a lot more 23XI Racing going to a new brand next year. I don't think Kurt Busch is going to see a lot of people say that we're really, really soon on what was going to happen overall with Kurt Busch next year. But I think at this point, I think that this really, really confirms a lot of things. And I think that this is going to mean Kurt Busch is at 23XI Racing next year. But I'm really, really excited to see that Ross Chastain is coming to the team. And I'm really excited about the future of the team because I really like Ross Chastain a lot. And I've been a big fan of his for a very, very long time. And to see that you have two really good drivers that I've been a big fan for a very, very long time, it's great to see that we are going to see Ross Chastain end up at that team next year. And I'm overall really, really excited about it for sure. I really, really am. I think that Ross is a good driver, and I hope he does really, really well next year, in my honest opinion. So, anyway, that is for today's NASCAR news video. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to the channel to get notified when a video does go live on my channel. Follow me Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. It's perfect. So, let's go below for that and combo your thoughts on today's video. How well do you think Ross Chastain will do a Trackhouse racing next year? Do you think he makes a playoffs next year or not? Let me know in the comments below. And what are your thoughts about NASCAR being the number placement forward? Do you like that a lot more than moving it backwards, or do you think they should not move at all? Let me know in the comments below. Anyway, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's video, and I'll see you guys next time for some more great and awesome NASCAR content. Take care, everybody.